A mother
on
in a
tight.
torn red dress ran through the snow. Her newborn pressed to her
Please,
chest,
hold on.
while her husband's
have to
drunken
keep
rage
going.
followed like a shadow. The wind swallowed her cries, but the bruises on her arms told a story louder than any scream. He dragged her behind the bar, slamming her against the frozen wall as the baby slipped from her trembling hands. On this silent Christmas night, no one should have heard. But violence doesn't need witnesses to scar
Where
a
do you
soul.
think you're going?
And while
can't
she
hide
begged
from
for
me.
mercy,
Please,
he raised
stop.
his fist
Leave
again,
us alone.
certain no one would come. But destiny had already sent someone, a veteran and his dog, who would change everything. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. And don't
Where are
forget
you
to like
watching
and
from?
subscribe for more
Don't
stories
forget
like
to
this.
like and
Snow
subscribe.
drifted over Everpine in slow, spiraling flakes, soft as ash after a long-forgotten fire. Under the white, the little mountain town tried its best to look like a Christmas card. Strings of warm lights looped along roof lines, plastic reindeer buried to their bellies in snow, wreaths hanging crookedly on old wooden doors. From a distance, it was charming. From up close, Hunter Calloway could see where the postcard tore at the edges. Cracked pavement beneath the powder, a neon open sign flickering in a liquor store window. A no trespassing sign tilted on a lamppost, like someone had shoved it one time too many. He walked with his hands in his jacket pockets, the coyote brown USMC field coat zipped almost to his throat. At 35, Hunter had the look of a man who'd forgotten how to relax and never bothered to relearn it. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, but not bulky. Built like someone who carried weight for a living and wanted to do it quietly. Dark brown hair, cut close in the same high and tight he'd worn for years, showed the first threads of gray above one temple. A faint white scar nicked his right eyebrow, slicing through the dark line like a scratch on an old photograph. His jaw was shadowed with one day's stubble, the kind that made him look more tired than rugged. His eyes were a gray blue that might have been soft once. But now they watched everything like they'd seen too much and were cataloging what might go wrong next. Old instinct more than paranoia. The core had wired his brain to notice exits, angles, strangers' hands. It hadn't taught him what to do with all that vigilance, when the loudest sound around him was Christmas music. At his side, tethered by a black lead that barely seemed necessary, trotted Kaiser. The German shepherd moved with a quiet, collected power, every step measured, as if he were absorbing the town through his paws. His sable coat, deep black along the back, fading into ash gray and warm brown on his flanks, caught the street lights in small, glossy highlights. A black tactical harness hugged his chest, worn but well cared for, with USMC K9 stitched in subdued letters on the side. Kaiser's head was held high, ears pricked forward. His amber-brown eyes scanned the world with an intensity that unsettled people who didn't know him. They were too sharp, too searching, as if he were listening to a frequency humans couldn't hear. 4 years old and in his prime, he had the lean, athletic build of a working dog. No extra softness anywhere. Even at rest, his body hummed with potential energy, ready to surge in any direction Hunter sent him. Town hasn't changed much, Hunter murmured, more to himself than to the dog. Everpine's main street stretched ahead, lined with storefronts wearing their brightest winter disguises. The small hardware store had painted a crooked snowman on its window. The bakery next door glowed golden from within. A plump woman in a red sweater, Mrs. Blanchard, if his memory hadn't rusted completely, moving between trays of gingerbread. The smell of cinnamon and butter drifted out every time the door opened and closed, clinging to the cold air like a promise. A local Santa sat near the giant town tree, his red velvet suit straining over a belly that seemed mostly real. He was in his 60s, with a real white beard and a ruddy face creased by years of squinting in mountain sun. Kids clambered onto his lap, cheeks pink above zipped-up jackets. Parents hovered nearby, some smiling, some scrolling on their phones, bundled in puffy coats and knit hats. Hunter watched them with a strange, distant ache that he tried not to name. Somewhere a few streets away, his younger sister, Hannah, would be decorating sugar cookies with her 2 boys. Hannah, 30, compact and freckled, auburn hair always escaping her ponytail, shoulders perpetually tense in a way that said she carried everyone else's burdens before her own. She texted him 3 times already. "You coming?" "The boys are waiting for Uncle Hunter." He'd promised he'd stop by in a bit. A bit had turned into a longer walk than he planned. Kaiser's paws crunched softly in the snow, leaving a neat line of prints beside the larger, heavier impressions of Hunter's boots. The dog's breath puffed white into the air, merging with Hunter's in brief clouds before the wind shredded them. "Relax," Hunter said under his breath, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the dog or himself. For a while, he let himself drift along the sidewalk, past the church with its stone steps dusted in white. Through one stained glass window, he saw flickers of movement. The choir, practicing. The sound of muffled voices, rising and falling together, leaked out when the heavy doors opened to admit a latecomer. Hunter slowed, watching. Inside was warmth, soft light, a crowd breathing as one, intimidating in its own way. He hadn't stepped into a church on Christmas Eve since before his first deployment. Kaiser's head turned briefly toward the church, nose twitching, then moved on. No threat there, no reason to linger. They passed a young mother standing near the tree, her long navy coat dusted with snow. She was maybe late 20s, tall and a little too thin, her dark hair braided and tucked into a cream scarf. Fatigue smudged faint shadows beneath her eyes, but when her daughter tugged at her sleeve, she still managed a soft smile. "Mom, look," the little girl squealed, pointing. She was 6 or 7, small and bundled in a purple parka with a faux fur hood, mittens flailing as she bounced. "A soldier dog." The mother flushed, half embarrassed, half amused. "Sorry," she told Hunter, voice warm but weary. "She loves dogs." "It's okay," Hunter replied, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "He likes kids." Kaiser confirmed it by flicking his ears and giving the girl a brief, solemn look that made her giggle. Then he moved on, as if the interaction had been a quick item checked off a list. Hunter's gaze kept drifting to the edges of the square, the places where the lights thinned and shadows thickened. It was habit. He had spent years being paid to look where other people didn't. Tonight, though, everything seemed harmless. Snow, decorations, people who believed the worst thing that might happen on Christmas Eve was the store running out of their favorite pie. So when Kaiser stopped, truly stopped, Hunter almost kept walking. The leash drew taut and jerked his hand, dragging his attention back into focus. Kaiser's entire body had gone rigid. His tail was lowered, but not tucked, a controlled line of tension. His ears were tilted not toward the music, not toward the chatter, but toward something farther down the street. His nose worked rapidly, drawing in the air in sharp little pulls. A low sound began in his chest, a growl that was more vibration than noise, running along the leash and into Hunter's bones. Hunter's pulse skipped. That sound, he knew that sound. It wasn't the warning rumble Kaiser used when a drunk stranger staggered too close. It was deeper, narrower, focused like the beam of a flashlight in a dark room. "Easy," Hunter said, though his own voice had gone flatter, more controlled. His eyes automatically scanned their surroundings, the world shifting into the familiar grid of threat assessment. Left to right, near to far, high to low, Families around the tree, no one moving too fast, no shouting that wasn't cheerful, no cars jumping the curb. "What is it?" he murmured. Kaiser didn't look at him. The shepherd's gaze was fixed toward the far end of Main Street, where the shops were older and closer together, their decorations more half-hearted. A little chill slid down Hunter's spine, not from the wind. There was a pattern with Kaiser, one Hunter had learned the way people learned weather signs. Every time the dog turned to stone like this, every time those intelligent eyes stopped roaming and locked instead on a single point, something happened. A hidden wire buried in the road, a man with a gun tucked under his jacket, a child bolting out between parked cars. The memory came back vividly. Kaiser lunging, barking like an alarm siren, Hunter running on instinct, the screech of brakes as a truck fish-tailed on gravel, a mother screaming, then sobbing with relief. What if this is one of those times? What if tonight, of all nights, I decide it's nothing? The thought dug into him with a small, cruel hook. Everpine might be wrapped in tinsel, but the world hadn't changed just because someone had thrown some lights over it. "Show me," Hunter whispered. Kaiser strained forward when Hunter loosened the leash, muscles bunching under his coat. The dog didn't bolt. Years of training held him back. But every line of his body said he wanted to. They left the bright center of the square behind. Sound of carols faded, swallowed by the soft hiss of falling snow. Streetlights grew farther apart, pools of yellow on the ground, with darker rivers between them. On their left, a pawn shop hunkered beneath a sagging awning, its display window crammed with mismatched items. A row of guitars, a stack of old radios, a glittering tangle of costume jewelry that looked dull through the glass. Across from it squatted the bar Hunter remembered only vaguely from his teenage years, though the sign looked newer now. Frost and Flame. The neon letters declared in flickering blue and orange, like ice and fire arguing in the same word. The building was a low brick rectangle, the kind of place the town pretended was harmless. Voices spilled out every time the door opened. A burst of laughter, the clink of glasses, a snatch of off-key singing. Warmth and the sour, sweet scent of beer rolled out with it, then vanished when the door swung shut again. Hunter's gaze slid past the front entrance to the side of the building, where a narrow alley cleaved between the bar and the taller, older brick wall of the hardware store. A metal door with a small, barred window sat halfway down, lit by a single security light that gave off a tired, yellow glow. Beyond that pool of light, the alley ran deeper into shadow. Kaiser's attention was fixed there, on the darkness past the light. His growl grew a shade louder. His claws scraped the concrete as he inched forward, choosing the alley over everything else. "Hey," Hunter said, the word half a warning, half surrender. He followed the direction of the dog's stare, squinting into the gloom. At first he saw nothing but snow, piled thicker where the wind had drifted it between the buildings. Then, as a fresh gust blew through, tugging at the edges of everything, it appeared. A strip of fabric, deep crimson against the white. It fluttered once in the moving air, then stilled. The hem of a dress or coat, just visible at the edge of the dark, too bright, too thin, too alone. Hunter's breath caught, not just because of the color, but because of the way it moved. Not like someone walking. More like something jerked, held, dragged. Then he heard it. A sound carried on the wind, faint enough that anyone else might have missed it. Not a laugh. Not a shout. A choked, strangled little sound that tried to be a cry and failed halfway through, cut off like someone had clamped a hand over a mouth. Hunter's whole body reacted. His heart punched once, hard, and then his pulse dropped into that slow, heavy rhythm he'd learned to trust under fire. The cold disappeared into the background. His vision narrowed, not like tunnel vision, but like a camera lens tightening on what mattered. Kaiser lunged, the leash snapping taut. The dog's teeth flashed briefly as he barked. Once, sharp and furious, a blast of sound that shattered the quiet of the alley mouth. Hunter didn't hesitate this time. Ignoring the tug of the town, square behind him, the lights, the music, the normal life he never quite fit into. He turned fully toward the alley. "Let's go," he said, voice low and steady. Snow whispered under his boots as he stepped off the main sidewalk, following the line of his dog's body into the narrow strip of shadow between brick and brick. The glow from Frost and Flame's neon sign flickered weakly behind him, painting the snow at the entrance of the alley in diluted orange and blue. Ahead, the darkness waited, that scrap of red vanishing deeper as the wind picked up. Hunter tightened his grip on the leash. Kaiser surged forward, guiding him. Somewhere in that alley, someone had just made a sound, like the beginning of a plea. And on this cold Christmas Eve in Everpine, the Marine and his dog walked into the dark to find out why. Noelle Hart had not planned to die that night. At least, not while holding her newborn. Snow sifted down around her in slow, whispering flakes as she stumbled behind the Frost and Flame bar, clutching her daughter to her chest. The baby, Lily, was wrapped in a blanket too thin for weather this cruel. But it was all Noelle had managed to take when she fled the apartment. Her arms shook as she held the infant close, trying to shield her from the wind that sliced through the alley like knives. At 25, Noelle had the face of someone who used to be pretty in a quiet way. Soft cheeks, round hazel eyes, lashes long even without makeup. But stress and sleeplessness had carved delicate hollows beneath those eyes. Her skin, normally warm and freckled, looked pale under the streetlight. Her dark brown hair hung loose, tangled from being yanked earlier. She wore a red knit dress, stretched and fraying at the sleeves, the color faded by too many winters and too little money. Lily squirmed weakly in her arms. The newborn had a tiny face, red from crying, with a tuft of black hair sticking to her damp forehead. Her breaths came in trembling hiccups, the distress of a baby who didn't understand why the world suddenly hurt. "It's okay, sweetheart," Noelle whispered, though she didn't believe it. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "Mama's got you." She had slipped out the back of the apartment 30 minutes earlier to buy formula from the corner store. Travis had been asleep, or so she thought. She had dared to hope she'd be able to go and return without waking him. She should have known better. A scuff of boots behind her froze her blood. Noelle turned just as Travis Hart burst into the alley, fury distorting his face. He had once been handsome in that reckless, charming way that made girls in high school fall too fast. Tall, sandy blonde hair, sharp jawline. But years of addiction had hollowed him. His cheekbones jutted like blades, his skin blotchy from drugs and booze. He wore a leather jacket with torn seams, jeans stiff with grime, and a patchy blonde beard that made him look almost feral. His eyes, normally a muddy blue, were now glassy and wide, pupils blown from whatever he'd taken. "There you are," he growled, his voice thick with slurred anger. "Running from me again, huh? You think you can take my kid and just walk out?" "She's not safe with you," Noelle said, backing up until her shoulders met the cold brick wall. "Please, Travis, don't wake the neighbors. Lily needs—" "What Lily needs is a father," he snarled. In one awful motion, he backhanded her across the face. Pain exploded in her cheek. She gasped, stumbling, barely keeping hold of her daughter. Before she could recover, Travis grabbed her by the front of her dress and slammed her against the wall, shaking her so hard the blanket slipped from Lily's tiny form. "Give her to me." "No, stop, Travis. You're hurting her." He didn't listen. He never listened. His hand squeezed her throat, thumb pressing into one side, fingers digging into the other. Spots swarmed Noelle's vision. She felt her knees weaken. Lily's bare cry pierced the night, the kind of sound that shouldn't have existed in a place this cold, this lonely. Travis snatched at the baby, his fingers closing around the fragile bundle. Noelle fought with what little strength she had left, clutching her daughter close with both arms. "Travis, please, shut up!" he roared. And then, a new sound cut through the alley. Not a car, not a person, a bark, sharp, explosive, commanding. Kaiser, the German shepherd, burst into the alley like a living missile, paws tearing up snow, eyes blazing with purpose. Hunter followed half a second behind, his boots digging furrows into the icy ground, breath white against the night air. Hunter Calloway saw the scene in a single, crystallized moment. Noelle pinned, Travis grabbing the child, Lily screaming, hands where they shouldn't be. Threat assessment complete in a blink. He didn't hesitate. "Drop her," Hunter barked, his voice deep, authoritative, trained to cut through chaos. Travis whipped his head toward the voice, surprise flashing across his face. Who the hell? Hunter didn't give him time to finish. Kaiser lunged, planting himself between Noelle and Travis, teeth bared, snarling with the controlled fury of a dog who knew exactly where to strike if ordered. He didn't bite, yet. He waited, protecting, guarding, command ready. Hunter's gaze locked on Travis with soldier precision. "Get your hands off her, now." "What, you think you can tell me what to do?" Travis spat, staggering slightly as his grip shifted. The stink of alcohol radiated from him. "Back off. This is my family." Hunter stepped closer. Not anymore. The tension snapped. Travis swung wildly, rushing Hunter with the blind aggression of someone too intoxicated to understand he was outmatched. Hunter sidestepped with trained ease, grabbed Travis's arm, twisted, and sent him crashing into the snow with a controlled takedown that looked almost effortless. Travis thrashed, cursing, trying to swing an elbow. Hunter pinned him with one knee and a forearm, applying enough pressure to immobilize but not injure. Noelle collapsed to her knees, clutching Lily to her chest again. The baby wailed, struggling to catch her breath. Kaiser immediately pressed his cold nose against Lily's blanket, sniffing gently before looking back at Hunter as if reporting, "Infant alive. Mother alive. Threat contained. For now." For a moment, Noelle swore she felt something impossible, like the dog wasn't just reacting to danger, but recognizing her. His eyes, amber and sharp, softened in a way that made her chest tighten. As if he understood pain, not fear, pain. A dog shouldn't look like that. A stranger shouldn't feel like that. Something about the way Kaiser hovered, protective but gentle toward her child, felt fated. As if their paths weren't crossing accidentally, but being pulled toward each other by something unseen. A strange, haunting thought tugged at her. Why do I feel like this dog has been searching for us? The sensation vanished when Lily cried again, but it left a tremor in her heart. A tremor that told her this wasn't over. Back in the alley, Travis still fought weakly beneath Hunter. "Get off me," he slurred, spitting blood-tinged spit onto the snow. Hunter pulled out his phone with one hand while keeping Travis immobilized with the other. "Everpine Police Department," he said calmly. "We've got an assault in progress behind Frost and Flame. Suspect in custody." "Custody?" Travis spat. "I'm her husband." Hunter's jaw tightened. Not tonight, you're not. Noelle flinched at the word husband, clutching Lily tighter. A door opened somewhere near the bar. A man with a heavy-set frame and a thick gray beard, likely the bartender, stepped out, blinking at the chaos. He wore a grease-stained apron over a flannel shirt, his breath fogging in the cold. His name tag read Rick. "What's going on back here?" Rick demanded, his voice gravelly from too many cigarettes. "Domestic assault," Hunter said without looking up. "Call the owner or keep moving." Rick grunted, took one look at Travis's twisted face, and muttered, "Should have known that guy would start trouble eventually." Then he backed up, patted his apron awkwardly, and slipped inside without another word. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Noelle forced herself to stand. Her knees trembled so badly, she leaned against the wall for support. When Hunter finally looked at her, really looked, she felt a jolt of awareness. His eyes weren't cold at all. They were steady, concerned, almost too gentle for someone who'd just taken down a man, twice in one night. "You're safe now," he told her. "He won't touch you or the baby again." The promise seemed impossible, yet the way he said it made something inside her unclench for the first time in months. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out. "Thank you." Hunter stood, dragging Travis upright with controlled force just as flashing police lights spilled into the alley. Two officers stepped out, both bundled in thick navy jackets. Officer Carla Hudson, a tall black woman in her 40s with square shoulders and a tired but kind face, led the way. Her breath clouded around her as she approached. "Calloway?" she said, brows lifting as she recognized him. "Didn't know you were back in town." "Just visiting," Hunter replied. "Came across this by accident." "Some accident," she muttered, eyeing Travis. "Hard again, should have guessed." She cuffed him with practiced efficiency while her partner, a short, round-faced officer named Thomas Reyes, took statements. Reyes had a gentle voice, soft brown eyes, and a sympathetic frown that deepened every time he looked at Lily. The officers loaded Travis into the cruiser. He screamed threats the entire time, how he'd get out, how Noelle was his property, how she'd regret this. Officer Hudson slammed the door shut hard enough to make him flinch. As the car pulled away, silence swept into the alley once more. Hunter stepped toward Noelle slowly, giving her space. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" She shook her head. A tear slipped down her cheek, hot against her frozen skin. "No." The wind whipped through the alley, cruel and merciless. Lily whimpered. Hunter glanced down at Kaiser, who was already watching Noelle with the unblinking intensity of a guardian. Hunter exhaled. "Okay, then you're coming with us." Noelle froze. I don't know you." "You don't have to," Hunter said quietly. "You just have to trust that staying here is more dangerous than trusting me." Noelle stared at him, then at Kaiser. The dog's steady gaze somehow made the decision easier. "Oh, okay," she whispered. Hunter nodded once. Kaiser stepped closer, brushing gently against Noelle's leg as if to guide her. Snow fell harder now, the town lights dimmer, and Christmas Eve stretched long and cold. But as they walked out of the alley, Noelle clutching her child, Hunter walking beside her, Kaiser trotting like a silent shield, the night didn't feel quite as terrifying. Not anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, someone had stepped into the dark for her. The ambulance's siren sounded muted under the heavy curtain of falling snow, more a distant wail than the piercing scream it usually was. Inside, the world shrank to harsh white light. the smell of antiseptic, and the steady beeping of a monitor that wasn't really needed, just standard procedure. Noelle lay strapped to the gurney, the thin blanket pulled up to her chin. Every bump in the road sent a sharp stab through her ribs. She tried not to wince, not to move, not to jostle the tiny bundle tucked against her side. Lily lay in the crook of her arm, newly rewrapped in a thicker hospital blanket, only her soft, flushed face visible. Someone had placed a knitted cap, pale yellow with a slightly crooked pom-pom, over her tufts of dark hair. She made faint little sighing noises, exhausted from the cold and the crying, her mouth twitching in her sleep. Across from them sat a paramedic, a woman in her 30s with sturdy shoulders and dark hair braided tight against her head. Her name tag read, J. Miller. Her brown skin had that weathered look of someone who'd seen too many winter nights on the job. But her eyes were gentle as she checked the baby's vitals. "She's doing well," Miller said, her voice calm, reassuring. "Heartbeat strong, temperature's coming back up." Noelle nodded without really registering the words. Her left eye was already blooming purple where Travis's hand had caught her. Her lower lip was split, a thin line of dried blood running toward her chin. Pain throbbed along one side of her chest, where his grip had slammed her into the wall. Her wrist, she realized now, that the adrenaline had faded, ached with a deep, sickening throb. The paramedic frowned slightly as she gently probed Noelle's side. "You're tender here?" "Yes." Her voice sounded small, foreign. "Could be bruised ribs," Miller murmured. "Maybe a fracture. We'll get x-rays to be sure. You did the right thing calling it in." "I didn't call," Noelle said without thinking. "He did." Miller looked toward the back window, where red and blue lights strobed faintly through swirling snow. Noelle turned her head just enough to see the dark shape of a truck following them, headlights steady. Even from here, she could make out the silhouette of a big dog sitting in the passenger seat, ears pricked, posture rigid. Hunter and Kaiser. A tremor ran through her. Not from fear this time, but from something more complicated. Relief. Confusion. A sense that she was teetering on the edge of a cliff and had no idea what the ground below looked like. The ambulance pulled up to Everpine Community Hospital, a squat brick building with a faded sign and a scattering of cars in the parking lot. It wasn't big, but the windows glowed warm in the cold night, promising light and noise and people who might know how to fix things. The doors swung open and cold air slammed in. Miller and her partner, a wiry man with sandy hair and sleeves pushed up despite the temperature, unlocked the stretcher and slid it out, wheels hitting the ramp with a clatter. "Careful with her ribs," Miller reminded, meeting Noelle's eyes briefly. "We've got you, okay?" Noelle didn't answer. She watched the snow-laced sky overhead as they wheeled her inside, her vision swimming from pain and exhaustion. Lily stirred, fussing, then settled again when Noelle shushed her. Inside, the ER was bright and overwarm, the combination of fluorescent lights and old radiators, making the air feel strangely thick. A nurse at the desk looked up, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, glasses perched halfway down her nose. She was in her 50s, with fine lines around her mouth and eyes that suggested she smiled more often than she frowned. Her badge read, Nurse Patty Groves. "What have we got?" she asked, standing. "Female, 25, Miller recited. "Suspected domestic assault, possible rib fracture, bruising to the face and wrist. 10-day-old infant, mild hypothermia on arrival, improving, no visible trauma." "Of course it's Christmas Eve," Nurse Groves muttered under her breath, though not unkindly. "Bring them through?" They moved Noelle into a small exam room. The walls were painted a tired blue the kind that tried and failed to be soothing. A tired clock ticked above a print of a pine forest. As the paramedics transferred Noelle to the bed, Lily began to fuss again. "I need to keep her with me," Noelle said, panic spiking. "Please, don't take her." "We're not taking her," Nurse Grove said firmly, arranging pillows to prop Noelle up. "She stays right here unless there's a medical reason otherwise." The words were so different from what Noelle was used to hearing, demanding, accusing. The tears pricked her eyes. She swallowed hard. The door opened again, and Hunter filled the frame for a moment. Snow dusted along the shoulders of his jacket. Kaiser was beside him, the big dog's paws silent on the linoleum, his harness slightly damp. Hunter's gaze went instinctively to the baby first, then to Noelle's bruised face. "How bad is it?" he asked. "We'll know more after the x-rays," Nurse Grove said briskly. "But she's awake, oriented, talking. That's a good sign." Hunter nodded, stepping aside when the nurse gestured him back. Kaiser, however, moved in the opposite direction. He padded across the room with quiet certainty, circled once, then lay down right in front of the bed, his body perfectly positioned so that anyone entering would have to get past him first. "Sir, I'm afraid the dog can't." Nurse Grove stopped mid-sentence when Kaiser lifted his head and stared at her. Ears alert, but expression calm, as if politely daring her to argue. Hunter cleared his throat. "He's a trained military working dog, ma'am. I can keep him under control. If it's a problem, I'll wait in the hall with him." Noelle surprised herself. "Please," she blurted, clutching Lily closer. "Can he stay? Just for a bit?" The nurse studied Noelle's face, then Kaiser's, then Hunter's. She saw the way Noelle's knuckles had gone white around the baby, the way her breathing hitched every time the door opened. "Fine," she said at last. "Door stays closed. Dog stays on the floor." She pointed a finger at Hunter. "If he so much as hops on the bed, you're both out." "Yes, ma'am," Hunter said. And if Noelle had been in any other state, she might have laughed at how much like a scolded teenager a Marine could sound. As the nurse left, Kaiser inched forward until his chin rested on the side of the mattress, inches from Noelle's leg. His amber eyes lifted to Lily's face. The baby, who had been fussing in little gasps, suddenly stilled. Her tiny features relaxed, mouth unclenching. Slowly, impossibly slowly, her gaze tracked down, pupils trying to focus, and landed on Kaiser's eyes. Something passed between them, something so quiet and strange that the hair on Hunter's arms prickled. Lily's fingers twitched, then stretched, as if reaching for the dog. Kaiser did not move, did not even blink. His breathing stayed steady, but his eyes softened in a way Hunter had only ever seen after missions. When the dog found the one wounded man still clinging to life under rubble. 10 days old, Hunter thought. You haven't even learned what the world is yet. But somehow you know this is safe. Noelle felt it too. For the first time since the alley, the tight band around her chest loosened. The sight of her daughter quieting at the presence of this dog, this stranger's dog, hit her somewhere deeper than logic. It felt, absurdly, like an answer to a question she didn't remember asking. A knock broke the moment. A woman stepped in, carrying a clipboard and a worn leather satchel. She closed the door behind her quietly. "Noelle Hart?" she asked, voice gentle. "I'm Emily Vargas. I'm the on-call social worker tonight." Emily was in her late 30s, with olive skin and dark hair cut into a practical bob that framed her face. Fine lines fanned from the corners of her brown eyes, not from age, but from the habit of listening hard. She wore a simple gray sweater, dark slacks, and a badge clipped to her hem. There was something steady about her presence, like a tree that had weathered many storms and still stood. Noelle swallowed. "Yeah, that's me." "I know you've had a long night," Emily said, pulling a chair closer. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but I'm glad you're here." She gave Lily a soft smile. "And I'm glad she's okay." Noelle's voice cracked. "I thought—" She stopped, swallowed again. "I thought he'd stop for Christmas. For her." Emily nodded slowly, no judgment in her gaze. "A lot of people hope that," she said quietly. "Holidays, babies, big life events. We want to believe they'll change the story. But it's not on you to fix someone who's hurting you." Tears spilled over, hot and humiliating. "I kept telling myself if I stayed, if I was patient, if I made things nice, he'd be different. And when I got pregnant, I thought, he'll see her and it'll be enough. I was so stupid." Hunter, who had been standing near the wall, finally spoke, his voice softer than it had been in the alley. "You weren't stupid," he said. "You were hoping. There's a difference." Noelle's gaze snapped to him, searching his face for mockery and finding none. He took a breath. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. Not ever. Not for any reason. "And not because it's Christmas," Emily added. "Pain doesn't take holidays." They went through the necessary questions. Emily asked about how long the abuse had been happening, whether there had been previous reports, where Noelle's family was. Noelle answered in halting pieces. 2 years. No, she'd never called the police. Her parents were 3 states away, older and not in good health, and she'd been too ashamed to tell them anything. Emily listened, jotting notes, her pen moving quietly. When Noelle talked about Travis's debts, the drugs, the way he'd controlled her money and friends and movement, Emily's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Okay," Emily said after a while. "Here's what we're going to do. First, the medical team will finish checking you out. Then, assuming they clear you, we need to make sure you and Lily have somewhere safe to sleep tonight. There's a small emergency shelter we work with, but—" She glanced at Hunter, then back at Noelle. "Sometimes people feel more comfortable staying somewhere connected to people they already know, even if they just met them in an alley." Noelle let out a broken laugh. "I don't really know him." Hunter cleared his throat. "I can help with resources," he said. "I'm not trying to make decisions for you. But I know some folks." He stepped into the hall while Emily finished explaining safety plans, protective orders. What would likely happen with Travis now that he'd been arrested? In the corridor, Hunter leaned against the cool wall and pulled out his phone. Kaiser padded out with him, then lay down across the doorway, as if physically refusing to let anyone pass without his say-so. Hunter scrolled through his contacts, thumb hovering over names he hadn't called in a long time. First, he dialed a number for a regional domestic violence hotline he'd seen posted at the base once. A calm voice answered, and he explained, briefly, the situation. Young mother, infant, immediate danger, small town with limited resources. They promised to coordinate with local advocates and send information to Emily. Next, he called Father Marcus at St. Gabriel's, the stone church near the square. Marcus was in his 50s, tall and slightly stooped, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that always looked like they'd already forgiven you for something. He had been a chaplain's assistant before taking his post in Everpine, and he carried that quiet, steady presence with him. "Hunter," Marcus said when he picked up, his voice warm with surprise. "Didn't expect to hear from you tonight." "Didn't expect to be calling?" Hunter replied. "I've got a woman and her newborn. Bad situation. She needs a place to land where her husband won't find her, at least for a few nights. Marcus didn't hesitate. "We can open one of the spare rooms at the rectory," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's warm and secure. And I know a few women who volunteer at the shelter. We can get her connected." "Thanks, Father." "Bring them when the hospital clears her," Marcus said. "Christmas Eve's supposed to be about new beginnings anyway." Hunter ended the call, then stared at another number on his screen, a contact labeled Lit Kara Nguyen, JAG. Kara had been a military lawyer he'd seen fight like hell for troops who thought they had no options. She was sharp, short, with a buzz cut she wore like a crown and eyes that could cut through steel. He hit call. It went to voicemail, wrong time zone. But he left a message anyway, outlining the situation and asking what legal protections might be available for a civilian woman with an abusive husband and a dangerous debt situation. Even if she couldn't take the case, she'd know who to point them to. When he stepped back into the room, Noelle looked up, eyes red-rimmed but clearer. Emily glanced at him, eyebrows raised as if asking silently, "Well?" "Hotline's looped in," Hunter said. "They'll support whatever plan you set up. Father Marcus can take them at St. Gabriel's for a few nights. It's secure, and he knows the drill. I've also reached out to a JAG contact for legal advice. She owes me a favor." Noelle stared at him like he was speaking another language. "Why are you doing all this?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were easy answers. Because it's right. Because I was there. Because I know what happens if nobody steps in. But the real one sat heavier in his chest. Because Kaiser dragged me into that alley, and for some reason it feels like I was meant to. He settled on, "Because you shouldn't have to do this alone." Silence stretched for a moment. Lily sighed in her sleep, and Kaiser thumped his tail once against the floor, as if agreeing. Later, after the x-rays confirmed bruised ribs and a sprained wrist, but no fractures. After Emily walked Noelle through the paperwork to document the assault, after arrangements were made with St. Gabriel's, Hunter stepped out into the hospital corridor alone. Through the glass doors at the end of the hallway, he watched snow falling thick and relentless, transforming the parking lot into a blank page. The Christmas lights strung along the hospital's roofline blurred into soft halos. He could hear faint carols from a TV in the waiting room, tinny and distant. He should have felt like an outsider again, standing there in his worn field jacket, smelling faintly of dog and cold air. Instead, he felt tethered, pulled into something that had nothing to do with orders or missions, and everything to do with a cry in the dark and a strip of red in the snow. He looked down at Kaiser, who had come to sit beside him, shoulder pressed lightly against his leg. The dog stared out at the snow too, ears relaxed now, posture calm. "You dragged me into this," Hunter murmured. Kaiser didn't look up, but his tail brushed once against Hunter's boot. Hunter let out a slow breath that misted the glass. Somewhere behind him, in a small blue room, a young woman and her 10-day-old child were alive because of a sound a dog had heard and a path he'd insisted on following. And for the first time in a long time, Hunter felt that maybe, just maybe, being pulled into someone else's story wasn't a burden. It was a strange kind of grace. Snow fell soft and steady over Everpine, as night settled across the town like a wool blanket pulled too tightly. The Christmas lights that glowed warmly across Main Street did little to pierce the deeper darkness creeping around the edges. The kind of darkness that had nothing to do with winter and everything to do with the people who hid inside it. St. Gabriel's Church sat at the top of a small hill, old stone walls rising like a guardian against the night. The rectory behind it, warm, modest, smelling faintly of pine and candle wax, had become Noelle and Lily's temporary home. Father Marcus had prepared a small guest room with quiet reverence. Clean sheets, folded blankets, and a space heater humming in the corner. Noelle had barely slept since arriving. She sat in the small bed with Lily nestled against her chest, rocking gently. Her face still showed the remnants of Travis's violence, bruises turning deep purple, a cut on her lip healing unevenly. Her dark hair fell in loose waves, framing her tired hazel eyes. Every creak of the old wood made her flinch. Every gust of wind rattling the window made her tighten her hold on the baby. But Kaiser, the German shepherd, lay stretched across the threshold like a living barricade. His sable coat was thick enough to blend into the shadows, but his eyes, those amber, intelligent eyes, tracked every movement in the hallway. His ears flicked toward the slightest sound. Footsteps in the distant chapel, the drip of melting snow from the eaves, the rustle of branches outside. He didn't sleep. Not really. He rested only in the way trained working dogs do. Muscles loose, mind alert, ready to spring into action the second something felt wrong. Hunter spent most evenings in the rectory common room, keeping a watchful, silent presence. Tonight, he had removed his jacket, revealing a fitted olive-green thermal shirt that clung to his broad shoulders and muscular arms. He sat at the small wooden table reviewing maps of the town and scribbling notes beside them. He looked every bit the Marine. Even at rest, he had the posture of someone expecting orders at any moment. But beneath the discipline was something more fragile, a sense that he knew this wasn't just another duty he could walk away from. He checked the hallway every few minutes, glancing instinctively at the guest room door. Kaiser always met his eyes with a calm but firm look, as if assuring him, "I'm here." Father Marcus passed through quietly, offering warm tea and a soft pat to Kaiser's head. The priest was a tall man, hair peppered gray, face lined with years of listening to other people's pain. Even he paused whenever he saw the bruises on Noelle's face, shaking his head at the cruelty in the world. For the first few nights, things were quiet. Predictably so. Almost too quiet. Hunter kept expecting the calm to crack, and it did. The first threat appeared on the third morning. Noelle stood outside the church preparing to walk to the grocery store with Lily strapped against her chest in a winter sling. She had barely taken 3 steps toward the sidewalk when Kaiser suddenly stiffened. The dog's head snapped toward the parking lot. Hunter followed Kaiser's line of sight and felt his stomach drop. The back left tire of Noelle's small sedan sagged, completely deflated. A deep slash ran across the rubber, clean, purposeful, made by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "No," Noelle whispered. "It wasn't like that last night." Hunter crouched beside the tire, jaw tightening. Someone did this on purpose. Kaiser growled low, the sound vibrating through the thin winter air. From the corner of the lot, a cigarette ember flared briefly before going dark, just a shadow of a figure turning away. Hunter stood, eyes cold. "Get inside. Now." They didn't make it 2 days before the next message appeared. A dead blackbird, neck twisted, wings stiff, sat in the center of Noelle's car hood. A thin line of blood trailed across the frost like handwriting. Noelle's legs buckled. She clasped her hand over her mouth to stifle a cry, Lily whimpering in response. "It's just a bird," she whispered shakily. But she wasn't convincing anyone, not even herself. Hunter removed the corpse with gloved hands. He didn't tell her the truth out loud. Someone left it as a warning, a sick, territorial reminder that she wasn't free yet. Kaiser paced around the vehicle, nose low, tail stiff, hackles bristling. Hunter watched him closely. When Kaiser tracked scent, he was almost never wrong. "Smell something?" Hunter murmured. Kaiser circled once more, twice. Then stopped, head lifting toward the edge of the lot. He barked, sharp and certain. That night, Noelle barely slept. Lily woke every hour, sensing her mother's fear. Kaiser remained a silent sentinel, ears angled sharply toward the door. Hunter installed 2 small security cameras, one above the rectory door, one facing the parking lot. The cheap plastic casings looked fragile, but the recordings would be enough for evidence if things escalated. And Hunter knew they would. After he finished drilling the last camera in place, he drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Owens was a broad man in his late 50s, with thinning sandy hair, a round face, and thick mustache. His uniform looked slightly too tight around the middle, and his eyes carried the worn-out resignation of someone who'd seen the town's worst and lost more than he'd won. "Calloway," Owens said, rubbing his temples when Hunter entered. "I heard about the heart arrest, ugly business." "It's not over," Hunter said. Owens sighed. "These things rarely are." Hunter leaned forward, placing his hands on the edge of the desk. "Travis isn't working alone. He owes money. He's tied to the betting ring behind Frost and Flame. Those guys think Noelle belongs to him and that she might talk." Owens straightened slightly. "You're accusing locals of harassment without proof." "I'm telling you Noelle's life is in danger." Owens shut his eyes briefly, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Look, you know this town. People stay quiet. I don't have the staff to put patrol cars on her 24/7. We'll keep watch, but..." He spread his hands helplessly. Hunter stared at him, disbelief dropping into ice-cold anger. "That's not enough." "Then get me something solid," Owens said. "A face, a plate, a camera hit. Otherwise my hands are tied." Hunter left without another word. He didn't realize how furious he was until Kaiser pressed his body against Hunter's leg in the parking lot, ears swiveled back in concern. Hunter rested a hand on the dog's head, breathing slowly until the anger cooled. Just enough. That night, danger came closer. Noelle, finally able to sleep, lay curled on the small bed with Lily on her chest. The baby's breathing was warm and rhythmic, a tiny heartbeat against her own. The wind rattled the window frame. A branch creaked. Kaiser lifted his head. His ears twitched. Then he stood, silent, focused, eyes burning gold in the dark. He padded to the door, sniffing the crack beneath it. A growl rumbled through him like distant thunder. Hunter, dozing lightly in the common room chair, jolted awake to the sound. He grabbed his boots, half-laced them, and hurried down the hall. "What is it?" he whispered. Kaiser stepped back, letting Hunter approach the doorframe. Hunter knelt, running his fingers along the floor. There, barely visible, was a smear of wet snow. Someone had been standing right outside the room. He rose slowly, eyes narrowing. Kaiser suddenly lunged toward the window. He planted his paws on the sill, nose pressed hard against the cold glass. Hunter joined him, just in time to see footprints in the snow below. A single line, fresh, leading toward the dark street, and something else. The faint smell of cigarette smoke drifting upward. The exact brand Travis always used. The exact smell Kaiser had picked up in the alley that night. Noelle woke with a strangled gasp, clutching Lily. "What's happening?" Hunter stepped toward her, voice firm but gentle. "Someone was here. You're okay." Kaiser heard it first. Noelle's breath trembled. "He won't stop. He won't stop until he kills me." Her voice cracked at the last words. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she hugged her daughter tightly. Hunter sat beside her on the bed, careful not to crowd her. His hand hovered for a moment before resting lightly on her shoulder. "Noelle," he said quietly, "I promised you that you're safe. And you are. Not because you're hiding, but because we're not letting him reach you." Her voice came out in a whisper. "I don't want to die." "You won't," Hunter said. His tone held no hesitation, no doubt. "Not while I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes, letting herself believe him, just for a moment. But when Hunter stood, returning to the window, he knew the truth. Protecting her wasn't enough. They needed to cut out the rot, end Travis's ties, end the debts, end the men behind him. Because the darkness in Everpine wasn't fading, it was gathering. And Hunter could feel, deep in his bones. This fight was only beginning. The storm rolled in just after midnight, swallowing Everpine in a curtain of white. Wind howled around the stone walls of St. Gabriel's like something with teeth, rattling old glass and shoving fists of snow against the windows. The Christmas lights strung around the church flickered, fighting to stay alive in the gale. Inside the rectory, the world felt smaller than usual, warmer, but somehow tighter, as if the walls themselves were bracing. Hunter moved through the dim common room with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd spent too many nights on watch. He wore a faded green Marine Corps t-shirt under his partially zipped field jacket, dog tags glinting at his collarbone. His jaw was shadowed with dark stubble, making the lines of his face even harsher in the low light. He checked the front door lock, then the side door, then glanced at the small monitor showing the feeds from his 2 cameras. Snowflakes streaked across the grainy image like static. Kaiser lay near the hearth where a small fire burned. But lay was only a technical term. His body was down, his mind was elsewhere. Ears flicking, nose twitching, his eyes tracked Hunter's every movement. Whenever the wind gusted hard enough to whistle under the door, Kaiser's head snapped up, tail stiff. Down the hallway, in the small guest room, Noelle sat up in bed, back against the headboard. Lily curled against her chest beneath a double layer of blankets. The baby's breath warmed the hollow of her collarbone. The steady weight of her daughter was the only thing keeping her anchored. Shadows from the storm-tossed trees outside crawled across the walls like restless hands. She could still feel the phantom memory of Travis's fingers around her throat. Sometimes, when the wind howled just right, she swore she heard his voice in it. A soft knock came at her door. "Hey," Hunter said quietly from the other side. "You awake?" "I don't really sleep much anymore," Noelle answered, trying for humor and almost making it. He opened the door just enough to lean in, careful not to let the hall's colder air rush onto the baby. His gaze flicked first to Lily. He always checked the baby first, then to Noelle. "Storm's getting worse," he said. "If the power goes out, we've got extra blankets and a backup generator for the heater. You need anything?" She shook her head, dark hair falling into her face. "Just for this to be over." He nodded, understanding more than he said. "We're closer than you think." She almost asked him how he could be so sure. But Lily stirred, making soft noises, and the question slipped away. Back in the common room, Hunter sank onto a chair near the fire. The flame sent a glow across his tired features, highlighting the faint scar that ran from his left temple down toward his ear. A reminder of another winter, another fight. Kaiser rose and patted over, pressing his head lightly against Hunter's knee. "You feel it too," don't you?" Hunter murmured, fingers sinking into the dog's thick fur. "They're not done." Kaiser's only answer was a low breath through his nostrils and a small shift of weight toward the front of the house. The storm masked a lot of sounds: the creak of branches, the rattle of ice, the distant crack of something falling. But there were some noises even snow couldn't swallow, like the crunch of boots on packed powder, or the faint metallic clink of something set gently against stone. Kaiser heard it first. His head snapped toward the front door, body going from relaxed to ready in a single heartbeat. The fur along his spine rose in a slow, bristling wave. A low growl seeped from his chest, so quiet Hunter almost missed it under the wind. Hunter was on his feet before he knew he'd moved, heart rate jumping but thoughts sharpening. He crossed to the nearest light switch and clicked it off, plunging the room into shadow. Only the dim fire and the weak glow from the hallway lights remained. "Stay," he whispered to Kaiser, then moved to the front window. He pressed his shoulder against the wall and eased one finger under the edge of the curtain to create the smallest of gaps. Outside, the world was a blur of white and shadow. But in the swirling snow he could just make out the churchyard and the faint suggestion of movement near the base of the rectory steps. 3 figures, hoods up, faces mostly hidden by scarves and hats. One stood a little behind the others, broader in the shoulders, posture loose, but oddly confident, as if he were used to giving orders, not taking them. Something glinted near the door. A canister. Another thinner shape, a rag. Gasoline. Hunter's pulse pounded in his ears. Kaiser suddenly broke his stay on his own. Instead of moving toward the door, he pivoted toward the hallway, toward Noelle's room. He padded quickly, nails clicking on the floorboards, and stopped right outside her door, planting himself there with uncommon urgency. He looked back at Hunter with an expression the Marine hadn't seen since deployment. Eyes wide, ears pricked so high they almost folded forward, body rigid. It was the look Kaiser had given him years ago, seconds before a hidden roadside bomb detonated 20 meters from their patrol. The same wordless insistence. "Move them, now." Hunter's stomach dropped. This wasn't just trespass or vandalism. This was escalation. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, the tactical part of his brain spinning through options. Fire, smoke, limited exits. 1 staircase. Wind in the wrong direction could push flames straight along the wooden hallway. In the guest room, Noelle stiffened and turned her head as Kaiser's claws scratched once at the door. "Hunter?" she called softly, voice tight. "What's going on?" "Stay put and keep Lily close," Hunter said, forcing his voice to stay calm even as adrenaline surged. "I need you to stay away from the windows. Understand?" She did. Terror had taught her how to follow orders when danger crept close. Hunter grabbed his jacket, zipped it up fully, and checked the holster at his waist. He wasn't reckless. He hated using it. But tonight, the weight of the pistol felt less like a weapon and more like a last line of defense between a newborn and the men who wanted leverage more than human life. He made for the back door instead of the front, slipping outside into the teeth of the storm. Snow slapped his face, stinging his skin, but he moved low and fast along the side of the rectory. His boots disappeared into the drifts with each step, erasing his tracks almost as soon as he made them. As he rounded the corner, the figures at the front door came into clearer view. 2 of them huddled near the threshold, one slim, jittery, the other taller, fingers clumsy in gloves as he fumbled with the matchbook. The third man stood slightly apart, broad shoulders under a dark parka, hands shoved in his pockets like he was just out for a stroll. The snow clung to his eyelashes, but his gaze was sharp, restless. Hunter recognized him from the bar, not because they'd spoken, but because you don't forget a face like Randy Cole's. Randy was in his mid-30s, with a buzzed haircut, neck tattoos disappearing into his collar, and a nose that had been broken at least twice. His eyes were a flat gray, like river stones. Randy had been Travis's friend since high school, the one who always lingered in the back of photos, the one people said you shouldn't cross if you valued your kneecaps. Tonight, Randy looked right at home in the snowstorm. "Come on," the slimmer man hissed, voice barely audible over the wind. "My fingers are freezing." "You'll live," Randy said. His tone was casual, almost bored. "Just light it and get it done. Nobody's gonna cry over a drunk wife who ran off and a baby that ain't even worth." He didn't get to finish the sentence. Hunter moved like a shadow. He crossed the last few yards in a burst, grabbed the arm holding the lighter and rag, and twisted hard. The man yelped, something popping in his wrist. The canister fell, gasoline sloshing into the snow. The taller man swore and spun around, swinging clumsily. Hunter ducked, drove his shoulder into the guy's midsection, and rolled, sending him sprawling onto the steps. The impact knocked the air out of the thug in a shocked grunt. Randy stepped back, eyes narrowing. He didn't panic. Instead, he took 2 measured steps to the side, putting distance between himself and the chaos, gauging, calculating. "Marine?" Randy said, recognition sparking. "Figures you'd stick your nose where it doesn't belong." Hunter's breath steamed in the cold as he rose, posture solid. "You bring fire to a church with a woman and a 10-day-old inside, and you want to talk about what does and doesn't belong?" The man on the steps groaned, clutching his stomach. The slim one cradled his wrist, whimpering. Randy smiled, slow and humorless. "Travis wants his property back. We're just reminding her that running has a price. People aren't property." "Some are," Randy replied. "Depends on who's holding the debt." Inside the rectory, Kaiser paced back and forth in front of Noelle's door. Lily had started crying, short, desperate wails that cut straight through Noelle. She could hear muffled voices outside, the storm swallowing most of the words, but not the tone. Hard, threatening. "Hunter," she whispered, rocking the baby. "Please come back." In the yard, the storm intensified, snow swirling around the men like a veil. Randy shifted his weight. Hunter recognized that tell. Measured, coiled, the prelude to violence. "You got 2 choices, Marine," Randy said. "Walk away, and this place just has a little accident someday when you're not around. Or stick your neck out and watch how fast this sleepy little town forgets to care when things go bad for you, too." Hunter's lips thinned. "You think I scare that easy?" Randy's smile sharpened. "I think you care about that woman and her kid. More than you should." Hunter took 1 deliberate step forward. The man on the steps scrambled out of the way, suddenly very eager not to be between them. "You come near her again," Hunter said, voice low and even, "and I will make sure there's nowhere left in this town for you to hide. Not from the law, not from your own crew. I know your type. You live off fear like it's oxygen. But I've seen what happens when cowards like you finally meet people who don't break anymore." Randy's jaw clenched, eyes flicking just briefly toward the church camera under the eave. A muscle ticked in his cheek. "That thing recording?" he asked. "Yup," Hunter said. "And Sheriff Owens already has copies of the last week, just in case anything happens to us." That was a bluff. Owens had copies of some things, not all. But Randy didn't know that. The thug with the injured wrist muttered, "Randy, man, let's just go." It's freezing, and this isn't worth it. Randy held Hunter's gaze for another long moment, the storm howling between them. Then he stepped back, raising his hands in a mock gesture of surrender. "Enjoy your little church," he said, "but you can't camp there forever. Sooner or later, people gotta come out, go to work, live their lives. That's when we'll talk again." He turned, trudging away through the snow. The other men scrambled to follow. Within seconds, they were half swallowed by the blizzard, just 3 smudges moving through the white. Hunter watched until they were gone, then kicked the canister farther into the yard, away from the door. His breath came faster now that the immediate threat had passed. His muscles ached with the familiar burn of controlled violence, the kind that never quite left his bones. Back inside, Kaiser met him halfway down the hall, nose going straight to Hunter's gloved hands, checking for blood, for injury, for any trace of something wrong. Finding none, the dog exhaled sharply, shoulders dropping a fraction. Noelle stood in the doorway of her room, Lily against her shoulder, the baby's cries slowly subsiding. Her eyes were huge in her bruised face. What happened? Hunter shrugged out of his jacket, snow dripping onto the mat. They tried to scare us, tried to do worse. But you stopped them? For tonight, he said. Tonight they walked away. She swallowed, clutching Lily tighter. They'll come back. I know. He met her gaze, and for a second he let her see what he usually kept hidden. The steel, the resolve, the parts of him forged in deserts and war zones far from evergreen trees and Christmas lights. I can keep fighting them off, he said quietly. But that's just buying time. We need to take this higher, off the board. We need to make sure that when they come back, it's not just me and Kaiser waiting. It's the kind of backup they actually fear. Like who? People with badges, he said. Real ones. Not the kind Travis thinks he owns. Noelle shivered, but it wasn't from the cold. Something in Hunter's voice made her believe that for the first time in her life, someone was planning more than just survival for her. Behind her, Lily gave a soft, sleepy sigh. Kaiser walked over and sat near the crib, eyes on the window, as if daring the storm to try again. Outside, the snow kept falling. But somewhere beneath the weight of it, lines were being drawn, and Hunter knew, with the clarity that only comes on the edge of danger, that the next move wouldn't be in the shadows. It would be in the light. The storm arrived with a violence no forecast had predicted. Snow spiraled in thick, blinding sheets, whipped by a wind so fierce it made the church roof groan like an old ship straining against the sea. Christmas lights across Everpine flickered, dimmed, and finally surrendered to the darkness as power lines sagged under the weight of ice. The world outside St. Gabriel's became a white void, swallowing streets, trees, and sound. Inside the rectory, everything was too quiet. The candle Hunter lit on the table shook from the draft, sneaking under the door, casting unsteady shadows across his face. He paced the room in small, tense strides, jacket zipped, boots on, as if expecting the storm to break open the walls at any moment. Kaiser lay near the hallway, but his body was rigid, ears high, his stare fixed at Noelle's door. He sensed something long before any human could. Hunter checked the cameras again, static. Snow smothered the lenses, turning the screens into swirling blizzards. Great, he muttered. We're blind. He walked toward Noelle's room, meaning only to check one more time before he brewed coffee. But the door was cracked open. Light spilled out onto the hallway floor. Noelle? He called softly. There was no answer. He pushed the door wider. The blankets on the bed were still warm, the imprint of her body still visible. Lily's tiny knitted hat lay abandoned near the pillow, a detail so wrong it made the back of Hunter's neck prickle. And Kaiser. Kaiser didn't walk inside. He bolted. The dog lunged forward, nose to the floor, inhaling sharp and fast. A low, vibrating growl rippled through his chest as he caught the scent. Old sweat, gasoline, cheap cologne, cigarette smoke. Travis. And more than one man. "No," Hunter breathed. "No, no." He spun toward the back door, but Kaiser was already there, pawing at the wood, barking once, loudly, as if saying, "Now." Snow blasted into Hunter's face when he threw the door open. The wind nearly knocked him backward. The cold bit instantly into his skin. But he didn't waste a second. He grabbed his rifle, slung it across his chest, secured his flashlight, and nodded once to Kaiser. "Find them." Kaiser launched into the storm, tail straight, head low, bounding through drifts that swallowed his legs. Hunter ran after him, vision blurred, breath burning. The night was a chaos of wind and ice, erasing everything the moment it formed. But Kaiser didn't need sight. He needed scent, and he had it. They crossed the churchyard, dashed between gravestones half buried in snow, and followed a trail only Kaiser could read. Hunter saw nothing, just white, but trusted the dog with the unquestioning faith of a soldier who had survived because of him more than once. Snow stung his eyes. His thoughts blurred between Noelle's terrified face and Lily's small hands reaching for the air. The memory of the empty room tightened something deep inside his chest, something that turned fear into a sharpened fury. They reached the road, completely empty. Kaiser didn't stop. He veered left, toward the tree line leading to the lake. Hunter cursed under his breath. The lake cabins. Of course, Travis would take her somewhere no one could hear her scream. The wind shrieked, bending the pine branches violently. Leaves and frozen needles whipped Hunter's coat. Kaiser slowed for a moment, sniffed, then pushed on. Hunter followed until they broke through a clearing and saw a faint, flickering glow in the distance. Firelight. A cabin, small, weather-beaten, barely visible through the storm. Inside, Noelle's breathing trembled as she clutched Lily against her chest. Travis shoved her into the corner, his face flushed red from alcohol and rage. His hair was soaked from the snow and blood crusted on his knuckles. His eyes, always too wild, were nearly feral tonight. "You think you can run from me?" he snarled. "You think Christmas is some magic night that saves you?" Two other men stood behind him. One tall and lanky, face thin as a blade. The other shorter but solid, cheeks ruddy, eyes darting nervously toward the window. Travis held a lighter in one hand, a sloshing can of gasoline in the other. He smelled like a nightmare. "If I lose everything," he said, voice cracking into insanity, "then we all burn. Together." Noelle cried out, covering Lily's head with her arms. The lanky man muttered, "Travis, you're losing it." "Shut up!" Travis roared. He swung the gasoline can wildly, splashing fuel across the cabin floorboards. The smell hit Noelle so hard she gagged. Just then, the floor creaked under his misbalanced step. Lily slipped from Noelle's shaking arms, tumbling toward the doorway. Noelle screamed, diving forward, but her knees hit the ground too hard, and the baby slid across the icy wood. A sudden gust cracked the cabin door open. Snow poured in. Lily's small body slid over the threshold and onto the frozen lake. The baby skidded several feet, wrapped only in her blanket. A web of cracks spidered across the ice below her. Noelle's scream tore through the storm. "Lily!" Before Noelle could crawl another inch, a blur shot past her. A streak of black and gray. Kaiser. He burst through the doorway, claws scraping the ice, body low and powerful. His eyes locked on the tiny bundle sliding toward danger. He lunged, teeth gripping the blanket, not Lily's skin, just the fabric, pulling her gently but with desperate strength. The ice groaned loudly beneath his weight. A crack split toward his front paws. "Kaiser!" Hunter's voice cut through the storm as he sprinted toward them. The dog didn't hesitate. He dragged Lily back across the weakening ice, step by careful step, ears flat, tail stiff for balance. When Hunter reached them, he scooped Lily into his arms, checking her quickly, crying, terrified, but unharmed. "Kaiser, good boy." Hunter's gasped, voice raw. Behind them, Travis stumbled out of the cabin, unhinged laughter bursting from his throat. "You think you can save her? You think this ends with you walking away?" Hunter set Lily inside Noelle's trembling arms, then stepped onto the ice. Travis charged, swinging the empty gasoline can. Hunter dodged, grabbed Travis's arm, twisted, and slammed his fist into Travis's jaw. The man stumbled, but didn't go down. They fought on the cracking lake surface, punches landing with the sound of wet fabric and bone. Travis clawed at Hunter's coat, screaming curses, spittle flying. Hunter struck him again, this time a blow to the ribs. Travis staggered back. The ice beneath him cracked loud enough to echo. "Don't move," Hunter warned. Travis moved. The ice shattered, and he plunged through the surface into the black, freezing water. His scream was cut off instantly. Hunter dropped to his knees, reaching into the jagged hole. He grabbed Travis by the collar, hauling him up with a grunt. The shock of cold had drained Travis's strength. He flailed limp, shivering uncontrollably. Hunter dragged him onto the ice, rolling him away from the fracture line. Sirens wailed in the distance. Closer, closer, then suddenly headlights flashed across the snow. 4 federal SUVs skidded to a stop. Agents poured out, snow flying around their boots. A tall man with dark skin and a peaked cap stepped forward. Agent Reed of the state's Violent Crimes Task Force. Broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with a deep voice and an air of absolute command. "Calloway," Reed shouted. "We got your distress signal. Where are they?" Hunter pointed toward the cabin. 2 inside, armed. Travis is here, alive, barely. Agents swarmed. Within minutes, the cabin was secured, the 2 accomplices arrested, and Travis restrained and loaded into the ambulance. Noelle clung to Lily, sobbing quietly as Kaiser pressed himself against her legs, tail wagging weakly, as if telling her the danger was passing. Hunter knelt beside them, brushing melting snow from Lily's blanket. His hands shook, just barely, but he steadied them by resting one on Kaiser's head. "You're safe," he said softly. "Both of you." And with the storm raging around them, all 3 huddled together in the one patch of peace left on Christmas night. Spring did not arrive in Everpine with a sudden thaw. It came slowly, like a shy guest unsure whether it was welcome. Snowbanks shrank day by day, turning into small rivers that trickled along the curbs. The pines regained their deep green color, and the wind no longer carried knives of ice. The town breathed again after a winter that had nearly broken it. And for Noelle Hart, every patch of melting snow felt like a reminder that survival could grow into something more. Her new apartment sat on the 2nd floor of a small brick building near the community center. It was modest, with a creaky old staircase and a balcony that looked toward the mountains. But it was hers. A safe place. A place where no shadows waited behind doors. Noelle, now with healthier color in her cheeks and far fewer tremors in her voice, balanced a stack of donated blankets on her hip as she unlocked the apartment door. Her long brown hair was tied loosely in a low braid, and the once haunted stillness in her hazel eyes had been replaced with something gentler: purpose. She wore a soft gray sweater and jeans, far from the torn red dress she had once hidden inside. Inside the apartment, Lily toddled unsteadily toward her on puffy toddler legs, giggling. At 10 months old, she was tiny but fierce, with a dark tuft of hair and bright, joyful eyes. She wobbled, then reached out both chubby hands toward Noelle's jeans. "You're getting too fast for Mama," Noelle laughed, scooping her up and kissing the top of her warm head. Lily squealed and immediately grabbed Noelle's braid, tugging playfully. Today was busy. She had her shift at Harbor House, the town's shelter for women escaping abusive situations. The place was run by a woman named Mariah Lane, a tall, slender woman in her early 50s, with silver-streaked black hair always tied in a firm bun. Mariah had a firm handshake, dark, kind eyes, and a voice that could go from gentle to commanding in one breath. She had spent decades advocating for women whose stories the system had forgotten. Her calm strength had become one of the anchors in Noelle's new life. "Ready, little star?" Noelle murmured to Lily. "We have a big day." Later that afternoon, Harbor House buzzed with quiet energy. The building, once a small clinic, had been repainted in soft beige and lavender tones, making the hallways feel warm and alive. Women moved in and out of rooms, some with babies, some with bruises still fading. Noelle passed each one with the same personal softness she had always longed for someone to offer her. Mariah approached her, clipboard in hand, glasses perched low on her nose. "Morning, Noelle. You look brighter than ever. Lily keeping you busy?" "She's learning to run," Noelle said. "I fear for my furniture." Mariah cracked a rare smile. Good problems to have. Her expression softened into something sincere. "I've been proud of you, you know. Not just for surviving, but for becoming someone women here can look toward." Noelle's cheeks warmed. "If I can help them feel even a fraction as safe as I did, then it's worth it." Mariah nodded, squeezing her arm gently before turning to speak with another staff member. In those moments, Noelle felt the heavy winter inside her finally melt. That evening, a familiar truck parked outside the community center. Kaiser jumped out first, tail wagging high, his sable-black fur gleaming in the golden dusk. The 4-year-old German shepherd had grown even more expressive in the months since the rescue. He walked with a confidence that came from being both a trained protector and a loved companion. Hunter stepped out after him, wearing his crisp Marine Corps uniform. Dark blue trousers, khaki shirt fitted across his broad shoulders, ribbons neatly aligned above his left pocket. His hair was freshly trimmed, beard shaved clean, the sharp angles of his jaw making him look both formal and absolutely himself. He had returned from his base 2 days earlier for Everpine's Light After Winter ceremony, where he had been asked to speak about recognizing early signs of domestic violence within military families. The seminar he now led for Marines had become unexpectedly meaningful, a mission he did not know he'd needed. "Evening," Hunter called as he approached Noelle, who stood on the steps with Lily in her arms. His smile was small but warm, and he let Kaiser go first. Lily shrieked joyfully. "Kai!" Kaiser trotted right up to her, sitting proudly while she tugged at his ear with both hands. His tail thumped the ground. The big dog leaned into her tiny fingers as if she were royalty granting him attention. Noelle shook her head affectionately. "He lives for her." Hunter chuckled softly. "He thinks she's the reason the sun rises." Noelle glanced up at him, a shy smile tugging her lips. "Thank you for coming today. I know you've been doing a lot since you got back." Hunter shrugged. I go where I'm needed. His voice softened. Which includes here. There was a tenderness between them now. Not rushed, not forced, but slowly woven through shared fear, survival, and growth. They didn't speak about it often, but it existed all the same. As they walked toward the church courtyard, where the ceremony was set to begin, Kaiser suddenly stopped. His ears lifted sharply. He turned his head toward the street, nose raised, eyes narrowing. Noelle tensed instinctively. Old fear reared its head, but only for a moment. Hunter stepped beside Kaiser, hand resting lightly on the dog's harness. "What is it, buddy?" Kaiser sniffed the air, then looked back at Lily, staring almost too intently, like he was waiting for her reaction. Lily blinked, then reached toward him, babbling a soft string of sounds neither adult recognized. Kaiser's tail wagged once, slow and deliberate, before he nudged her foot gently with his nose. Hunter frowned slightly. That's different. Noelle's eyes softened with something like awe. Maybe he's telling her it's all clear. Maybe, or maybe, just maybe, Kaiser sensed a future neither of them could see yet. A quiet reassurance that this moment, unlike the ones before, held no danger. The tension broke, and Kaiser bounced once, playful again, racing ahead as if to lead the way toward the lights. St. Gabriel's courtyard glowed with lanterns hanging from pine branches. Families gathered with blankets and candles. Musicians tuned violins, practicing soft arpeggios that floated like warm breath into the cool air. The Light After Winter ceremony was a new tradition, created to honor survivors, first responders, and the community members who helped rebuild the town after the harsh season. Noelle stood backstage holding her note cards, hands trembling, but not from fear, from emotion. Father Marcus approached her with a gentle smile. His graying hair looked silver under the lantern light, and his calm presence made her heartbeat steady. "Whenever you're ready, child," he said warmly. "Your voice may reach someone who needs it tonight." Hunter stood in the audience, Lily bouncing on his hip. Kaiser sat proudly at his side, chest puffed out, as though he knew the ceremony was partly for him too. Noelle stepped onto the small stage. The crowd quieted. Lanterns swayed in the breeze. She cleared her throat and began. "I once believed winter never ended," she said softly. "That cold wasn't a season. It was my life. But someone reminded me that people can be warmth, too. Kindness can be warmth. Even a dog with more courage than anyone I've ever met can be warmth." Hunter's eyes shimmered as he listened, face softened in the glow. Kaiser tilted his head, ears perking when he heard Lily coo softly beside him. After the speeches, after the applause, after the songs and candles, the crowd dispersed into the gentle night. Noelle, Hunter, and Lily walked slowly under the last strings of Christmas lights still hanging along the church path. Snow had returned, not harsh or dark, but soft and drifting like feathers. Kaiser trotted beside them, paws sinking lightly into the fresh powder. Hunter lifted Lily onto his shoulders. She squealed with delight, tiny hands patting the top of his head. Noelle watched them quietly, something blooming slowly in her chest. Not a fairy tale. Something real. Something earned. She touched Hunter's arm. "I don't know who saved who. You saved us. But Kaiser saved all three of us." Hunter looked at her, long enough that she felt the warmth in his gaze more than any lantern glow. "I think," he said gently, "we all found each other at exactly the right moment. Under a clear sky where stars gleamed like promises, they walked as a small, imperfect, and extraordinary family, heading toward a future built not from fantasy but from courage, compassion, and the instinct of a dog who simply knew who needed saving. In the end, the story reminds us that miracles do not always arrive with thunder or angels in the sky. Sometimes they walk beside us on four paws. Sometimes they speak through the courage of a mother, the devotion of a soldier, or the quiet strength that God plants in the hearts of those who refuse to give up. If you are watching this tonight, may you remember that light can return even after the deepest winter. May God bless you and guide you through whatever storms you face. And may you continue to believe that protection, healing, and new beginnings can appear in the most unexpected ways. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need hope. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and grace. And may God watch over you and your loved ones every day.